welcome. This is Tigray Television. I'm Sablork Lama with today's English news. Since the start of the conflict in November 2020, Ethiopian forces have used various methods to obstruct aid coming into Tigray. Last month, Ethiopian forces had expelled 7 high-ranking level UN officials and required them to leave the country in the next 72 hours. Now, the United Nations is forced to suspend flights coming into Tigray to deliver much-needed aid after a UN flight carrying 11 humanitarian aid workers had to be returned back due to an airstrike conducted in Mekelle at the same time. The airstrike on Friday is just one of 5 conducted on Tigray's capital, injuring 11 civilians with 2 in critical conditions. Previous airstrikes had injured several civilians and killed 4, including 3 children. The ongoing conflict has displaced over 2 million people and has left hundreds of thousands of children suffering from malnutrition, a situation that has continued to deteriorate as the siege on Tigray has blocked aid and discontinued all commercial goods and banking services. In light of the continued bombardment of Mekelle, the UN had also announced the evacuation of 100 humanitarian workers from Tigray due to safety concerns, but it says it will continue its humanitarian intervention through 400 staff still remaining in Tigray. Tigray External Affairs Office released a statement on this week's airstrikes and said airstrikes on Friday endangered the lives of civilians on board a humanitarian flight. The statement says Friday's airstrike were conducted at the same time as the flight's expected time of arrival and in close proximity in its continued attempt to obstruct aid coming into Tigray. Shortly after the Ethiopian Air Force jet dropped bombs near the main campus of Mekelle University, wounding a dozen or so people, the UNHAS flight has forced to abort its landing and to return to Addis Ababa. The statement reads that by deliberately putting a plane full of civilians at risk, the Ethiopian government has violated international law and must be held accountable. The government of Tigray released a statement on October 22 calling for an immediate end to use child soldiers by Ethiopian forces in the ongoing conflict. The statement released by the government of Tigray on Friday condemns recent airstrikes on capital, saying the Abiy Ahmed's regime is trying to compensate battlefields losses by killing innocent civilians. The statement also condemned the use of child soldiers by Ethiopian forces, saying underage soldiers as young as 14, 15, and 16 are being forced into the battlefield without receiving proper military training or armaments and are being used as cannon foders. The statement says the government of Tigray welcomes any member of international community, human rights groups, and any other stakeholders interested to investigate on these war crimes and play their part to ensure the Ethiopian government is held accountable for its actions. The statement highlighted that Tigray's armed forces continue to make significant gains on all fronts, but states its disappointment for the immense human suffering and destruction that is being caused due to the ongoing conflict, including the death of untrained and underage soldiers. In the past, Ethiopian forces conducted 5 airstrikes on Mekelle capital, killing 4 civilians and injuring several. The airstrikes were conducted over 4 days in the past week. The first airstrike happened on Monday in a farmland in the outskirts of Mekelle at around 9 in the morning, killing 3 children, 2 brothers, and their cousin. In the afternoon, at around 12:30 p.m., another airstrike hit near Addahaki Open Market behind Planet Hotel, injuring 5 civilians. Another airstrike took place again on Wednesday at around 10:24 a.m., attacking near Maqala Hospital and Hamlin Fistula Center, initially injuring 9 civilians. One of the injured died on Friday morning, October 22, leaving behind a spouse and 2 children. On Thursday, October 21, another airstrike hit a farmland around Lachi, with no reported injuries or casualties so far. On Friday, October 22, the airstrike hit near Maqala University main campus, injuring 11 civilians with 2 in critical conditions. Ethiopian forces bombarded Maqala for the 5th time on Friday on October 22 at 10:25 a.m., resulting in the injury of 11 civilians. Our reporter Darasa Brahana was on the ground to observe the destruction caused and visited Aidar Hospital.
The morning October 22, 20 and 21 has unfortunately become the norm in Maqala. At 10:25 a.m., yet another airstrike would hit the capital, injuring several civilians and destroying a farmer's harvest. Dr. Takhle Birhan Gabrechiorkos, orthopedist and trauma surgeon at Aidar Hospital, says victims started arriving at the hospital at around 1 in the afternoon, with 11 wounded already having arrived at the hospital.
Today's airstrike, we have received, our hospital has received 11 patients, and those 2 are critical patients, and we are going to take them to the OR because they are critical, and it's a really devastating airstrike. And as the patients claimed, they are civilians, and they are not involved in any military activities. So it's horrible here. The first airstrike, which has happened near to Masawo, we have received around 5 patients, and as patients who came claimed, those 3 already died at the scene, at the trauma scene, and those 5 trauma patients, we have treated them, and some are in our hospital admitted, and some are discharged after we treated them. Those patients, those who are coming and those who are being traumatized, those who are physically harmed, they are civilians, and I don't know its implication, but the airstrike is harming the innocent people, starting from the kids up to the old, which are up to around 80 years of age. So it's horrible, and I don't think they are hitting the mission, the military mission. Instead, what they are doing is they are attacking the civilians, and it has no any connection to the war. So we are all frustrated with those things, and it has to stop immediately and right now. They are attacking the innocent people, those who are involved in their farms, those kids who are playing, and those who are traveling in the streets of Maqala. So it's bad, and it's not acceptable by any means, you know. And I don't know what I'm going to say, but even the international community, they have to take some action.
Neviat Gavre, an emergency nurse at Aidar Referral Hospital, says the crisis has been worsened by the siege on Tigray that has depleted the hospital's medical supplies.
This is the 5th round of airstrike targeting civilians in Maqala. It's really heartbreaking. Out of 11 injured, 2 are in critical condition and in need of constant follow-up. We are incapable of providing proper treatment to the patients due to lack of medication and medical equipment. The airstrikes are exasperating an already dire humanitarian crisis.
The attack was targeting civilians. I was hit by shrapnel while I was at a school.
The aerial bombardment of Mekelle in the past week has so far killed 4 civilians, including 3 children, and has injured several. The bombardments have also resulted in the destruction of private and public property, including hospitals and farmers' harvests.
One of the injured civilians from Wednesday's attack, an engineer named Zamariam, was just one of the casualties of the airstrikes. Zamariam was injured on Wednesday's attack and taken to Aidar Hospital for treatment. Just a day later, Zamariam passed away on 20th October 2021 due to lack of medication that led to surgical complications. Funeral ceremony was held at Lachi St. Aragawi Church, where his family, relatives, and friends was attended. Abraha Gabriel has more on this.
On October 20 at 10:24 in the morning, the third round of airstrikes would hit Mekelle, injuring 9 civilians and destroying civilian property. Now, one of the 9 injured, Zamariam Kidane, died on Friday, October 22, after receiving treatment at Aidar Referral Hospital.
He left for work in the morning only to end up being wounded and dead by an airstrike. He was the one who took care of me. He was young and humble. He was married and has a family he is responsible for.
He was killed by a military airstrike from our enemies. He was my husband and my children's father. We grew up in the same neighborhood. Zamariam was kind and generous. Even after he got married and moved away, he never forgot about us. He usually came and visited us periodically, even during the tough times.
He was a young and energetic man. We expected so much from him. Zamariam was hardworking and respected young man in his profession. He was hit by an airstrike while walking to his workplace. As Tigrayans, we have lost an industrious professional.
The mourners also stated their frustration with the ongoing bombardments on the capital and the human costs it has had so far.
Abiy Ahmed is attacking unarmed civilians because he is unable to tolerate his defeat at the war fronts by Tigrayan forces. His only capability now is bombarding civilians, and he has injured and killed many so far.
He is supposed to fight against armed forces, not against civilians. Bombarding civilians who have been doing their job at their work is shameful. Abiy Ahmed and his allies are doing this deliberately to capitulate the people of Tigray.
This is a clear demonstration of their intent. Their goal is eliminating the people. It is to eradicate the people of Tigray and nothing else. That's why they are bombarding civilians everywhere and denying food and other essentials coming into Tigray.
Zamariam was laid to rest at St. Aragawi Church in Lachi on Friday, where families and friends had the opportunity to say their goodbyes to yet another victim of the aerial bombardments.
Consecutive aerial attacks on Mekelle have devastated Mekelle's residents and their property. On Wednesday, an aerial attack hit close to Garabubu, causing damage on several civic and public-owned properties such as Mekelle Hospital, Hamlin Fisula Center, and Fremnatos charity organization. There's a report on this. Recent airstrikes targeting the capital have devastated civilians and civilian property, as well as civic society organizations such as Fremnatos Elderly, Mentally Disabled, and Children Charity Organization, a civic organization dedicated to caring for the most vulnerable members of the society.
I was taking a walk on this side, then the jet came and hit the neighboring area. After that, the shrapnel hit me and I fell on the ground and it hit my head.
At first, I was sitting in the courtyard and I heard the jet coming, but I didn't hear where it was coming from. Then it hit. There were children as well as the elderly there. We were so scared. There was so much dust. We didn't know where we could go.
ህዝብ ለ ተጨኒቁ ሓመድ በተለይ ኣብዚ ገዛና ብዙ ተወቂዕ ተደፍዲፍና ተጨኒቅና ለማን ኣቲ
ተንቆሎ ረዮም በخيም
All the children started crying and others were shouting because they were scared. I was just lying on the ground.
زحاونا እዚኣ ዝወዲቆ ዘጊሉ ወዲቆ ንሕና ላፍቲላና ለልዑለ ይስኢን
Our brother fell on the ground and we didn't even see him because of the chaos. It took him some time to get up. The children were so scared that they were just crying. The caretakers did what they could to calm them down. Abba Gavramedhin Berha is the manager for Freminatus and Mahari Berhu is the member of the organization's board. They say the damage on the organization is incalculable.
ብርክድ በለ መስተዋታት ተሰይሩሎ ክሊኒክ አላትና ናይት ክሊኒክ ኮርኒሳቱን ወዲቆሎ ለህፃናት መደቀስ ከምኡ ተመሳሳሊ
Glasses have been shattered. Also the clinics and children's bedroom ceilings fell off. But I can honestly say this is a list of our problems. We have children here less than 2 years old and many of them are traumatized and are finding it hard to calm down. The sound has traumatized them.
በአንደበት ብርቱዕ ድምጽ ተሰሚዑ በቲ ተሰምዐ ብርቱዕ ድምጽ ድማ ያው
We suddenly heard a loud sound coming. Everyone was just scared. There is material as well as physical damage that happened. All of the children are always scared.
The Ethiopian government has left no stone unturned to profit from the information blackout perpetrated on Tigray amidst the deadly war. This has banned all means of communication inside Tigray. It has also barred international media from entering Tigray and freely reporting. Aragawi Gabra Mikhail has more on this.
Fact-checking firms are supposed to be independent institutions that expose misinformation and disinformation claimed by media institutions and governments. However, it has been an open secret that the Ethiopian Current Issues Fact-Check was spearheaded by the State Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Redwan Hussein, who used to frequently appear on the state-owned and affiliated media to cover up the war crimes they committed throughout Tigray and bluntly denounces the efforts that aimed at exposing such criminal deeds. VOA recently reports about a research conducted on information campaigns that are related to Tigray since the beginning of the conflict by the Media Manipulation Casebook, which is based at Harvard Kennedy School. The ongoing conflict has been marked by not only a violent struggle on the battlefield and the indiscriminate attack of civilians, but a battle over facts with a complete communication blackout in Tigray, making any subject matter impossible to verify. The finding revealed that Tigrayan activists have been trying to raise awareness of international community about the situation in Tigray, while the state media and supporters of central government tried to disrepute any information critical to the Ethiopian government and its narratives about the Tigrayan war. The report also shed light on the so-called Ethiopian Current Issue Fact-Check. VOA reporters said that independent journalists and analysts who spoke to VOA believe that the Ethiopian Current Issue Fact-Check is a group launched by the federal government. Though the government officials denied this fact, the report exposed that an email and tweet by the Prime Minister's spokesperson, Bilane Suyum, directs media to the very ECIFC social media accounts from the very beginning. Moreover, ECIFC labels itself as a government website on its official Facebook page, though the same details is not found on its Twitter account. The chief editor and founder of Addis Standard, Tadale Lamma, also told VOA that the intention and affiliation of the group is very clear. Regardless of its name, the group aims to endorse the government's narrative. Tadale said,
From the very beginning, it was not about fact-checking as it was about countering information that the government sees as not congruent to its interests. It barely did any fact-checking.
According to the report, the ECIFC is followed by more than 84,000 on Twitter and 111,000 on Facebook, which is way more than the pro-Tigrayan prominent group Stand with Tigray. Claire Wilmot, the co-writer of Dueling Information Campaigns, The War Over the Narrative in Tigray, a report by the Media Manipulation Casebook, told VOA that the pro-government groups has a wide audience. It targets everyone, and its main targets are foreigners and foreign journalists and Ethiopians, whether they live in Ethiopia or are diasporas. Wilmot also told VOA,
The fact-check account draws its power from the pre-existing narrative that the TPLF is financing a massive disinformation campaign online, which hasn't been substantiated by any evidence. It uses the disinformation narrative to undermine any and all critical reportings that shows the government in a negative light.
According to Wilmot, The impact of ECIFC on the future of information health and on the ability of independent journalists to challenge government is a big question. VOA's report also stated that according to Ethiopia, journalists and analysts and legitimate coverage which criticizes the government and sympathizes to the cause of Tigrayans is considered as disinformation by the federal government. Meanwhile, despite of the face-saving efforts of the government to dominate the narrative, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, lobbyists, the UN and other international bodies favor the reports criticized by the government and its propaganda tool, the ECIFC. Though the Ethiopian government claims that the ECIFC is an independent fact check, it is exposed that it is a government propaganda tool immersed in discriminating disinformation.
Eritrean troops invited by the Ethiopian government have committed countless crimes in Tigray. One of these was burning of crops and cutting off of fruits on which farmers depended for subsistence. Consequently, most of Tigrayan farmers are now facing life-threatening hunger. Our reporters have been to Dabbatzahma Central Tigray to observe multifaceted damage of the war in that community, and here's the account regarding the burning of crops. Abel Tagab.
Ato Tadios Brhane and his wife, Wezero Haymanot Tesfu, were model farmers in the district of Dabbatzahma, Central Tigray. They were recognized and praised for their hard working and productivity among their community. But now, everything they produced is burned by the Eritrean troops who were in control of their locality in the previous month. They said that they are running out of food despite their effort to store tons of grains in the past years.
We have around 10 gardeners. They all were full of stuff and millet that were collected for years. The Eritrean troops burned it all. They burned it with diesel. Look at this. It was full of grains. Now it's empty. There were more than 24 quintals of teff and millet here, but we have nothing left now.
I've stored my harvest for years. As you can see it has turned into ashes by the Eritrean soldiers. I get sick by their act. We've thrown away most of it. It even becomes difficult to deal with the trashes.
These farmers were model in irrigation. They used to supply their surplus products to the market. Having lost the grains they stored for years, in unfortunate moment, they found themselves in an extreme hunger.
Look, all these gardeners. They were full of grains. Eritrean soldiers have burned all this. We are now in danger. We are facing an extreme hunger.
Everything has turned into ashes. I'm in a big trouble. I used to help people, but now I'm looking for other people to help me.
International rights groups and the media have documented rape and other forms of sexual violence on women in Tigray in the past few months. Now, a committee has been established by the Bureau of Women and Children to document and investigate sexual violence perpetrated on the women of Tigray. During the past year of conflict, Betelem Ayelna reports.
The interim head for the Bureau of Women and Children's Affairs in Tigray, Lamlam Hadgu, says the government of Tigray has established a committee to investigate and document rape and sexual violence committed during the ongoing conflicts by Ethiopian soldiers and their allies. Lamlam says the report will be imperative to ensure that perpetrators are held accountable. Sexual violence committed on the people of Tigray should have been properly investigated and documented. The report will be able to help us develop short, medium, and long-term plans for how to address the issue and ensure the women have the support they need. We have already established a committee working on gathering data so as to ensure criminals can be held accountable according to international law. Members of the committee highlighted that the community's participation would be imperative to ensure that those stories are properly documented. This shouldn't be just about the survivors that came forward. It should be about getting justice for everyone. We also need to collect the necessary data to ensure that survivors get the support they need, both medically and socially. We also need to document this for the history book and rebuilding Tigray. The goal is to make sure they are able to heal and become productive members of society. For that to happen, we need to change our way of thinking. The media has a big role to play in this.
We have to support the survivors so they can forward with their stories. This must be properly documented, and everyone has a role to play on this.
The study should focus on helping the victims to come forward about what happened to them and to help them recover from their trauma.
This is not a sin. The sin is what the soldiers did. Survivors have nothing to be ashamed of. What happened was out of their control. You are brave. This is how we should approach them.
Like he said, they could choose to hide so that the community wouldn't judge them. So we have to come up with a systematic solution. We can't just hide it.
The Tigray mother spared our pain for us. She is a hero. We shouldn't be sorry for her. Rather, we should be proud of her. That's the least we can do.
The religious leaders, legal professionals, and participants who took part in the meeting also said that it's everyone's duty to ensure that the stories of the survivor are properly documented.
That concludes our news for the evening. See you back here on Tuesday. Until then, have a nice time.